Welcome to Homeschooling Outside the Box, the podcast that encourages and equips moms to homeschool an outside-the-box child. Hey there, I'm Cindy Renna, and thank you so much for listening. I am happy to be back to the podcast. I took a little break, a little summer break, if you will, for the past few weeks, and now I am refreshed and ready to get back to helping to encourage and equip you in your homeschool. And oh man, is it a tough time to be doing that. Homeschooling is not for the faint of heart anyway, but then when you add a pandemic on top of it, it's really kind of amazing what's happening right now in our world. I know in my area, the homeschool group that a few friends of mine and I started, our numbers have skyrocketed, and there are lots of families choosing to homeschool, which is so wonderful. It's kind of the silver lining of this pandemic that whatever reason these families are choosing to homeschool, whether it's that they don't want their children to spend all day in a mask, or if they're nervous about catching COVID or being in that environment where it's kind of bigger numbers and they're worried about it from that end, or whether they have just really enjoyed this extremely long spring break with their children and they just don't want to send them back to school. So there's lots of reasons, I'm sure more than those three that I just gave, but for whatever reason, there are lots of families choosing to homeschool this upcoming fall. So that is wonderful. And it's tough, I know, for our group to decide what that's going to look like, what kind of events we're going to do, and if we're still going to be getting together in person, because we so need connection. We need to be with other people. As homeschoolers, it can really feel like an island sometimes, and it's good to be together. But of course, we want to be safe and definitely put that first. So hard decisions. But whether you are listening for the first time, welcome if you are, or if you're a longtime listener, this school year is probably going to look a little bit different than maybe you had hoped or planned. But I think that's one of the biggest benefits of homeschooling, is that it's a lifestyle. And so you really have a lot of flexibility on how you want your homeschool to look, and you have lots of options on how to shape that and mold that into a lifestyle that you desire for your family. As we start this adventure of homeschooling this upcoming fall, and some of you have already started it, I know that, we are going back at the end of the month in August. It's the middle of August right now if you're listening after this was posted. But we go year round, but we just finished our school year a couple weeks ago. Last week. I still like to give us a few weeks off, and that helps all of us sort of, shut down and reboot and start fresh and feel like, okay, we completed this year and now we're beginning a new year. And that makes way for lots of fun traditions, and the kids and I really look forward to that. We always end our final exam week with a presentation celebration, and this is a great way to get my husband in the loop. He works a lot of long hours during the week, so he doesn't always get to be there for all the fun of a homeschool culture, so he misses out on some of that. But this is a great way for him to be involved and see what we're up to, and it's a great way for the kids to share with him their favorite nature journal entry, or they read a section aloud that he chooses, and he can see, especially for the younger ones, how much their reading has improved, and just some other fun things that we do. But we always have root beer floats, and so that is our big celebration. So we all look forward to that. So anyway, we've just done that. Now we're headed into break, and I really am looking forward to some downtime. And all last week, I got all of my organizing done. I did all of our planning for fall, and even ordered all of our curriculum. I plan by the term. I don't plan by the year. So when I'm looking at what's next, I'm just looking at fall. And then that really helps me to stay in touch with where the kids are and what they need. Often we end up sticking with the same thing. For instance, math or higher sciences, like we're just going to stay in the same book, but it's still good for us to sort of touch base every few months and see what's working, what's not, what we can tweak. And it sort of refreshes us and recharges us. So I got all that done and rearranged the shelves and cleaned real good. So we are excited for the break, but ready to start back at the end of the month. So I want to talk today specifically to my autism mamas out there. Really, this could apply to anybody who has a child with challenges like ADHD or dyslexia. And honestly, you could probably get a lot from it, even if your child is typical, because there's so much Charlotte Mason interwoven in what I'm going to say today. But specifically for my mamas who have kids with autism, I don't know if you're just starting this adventure of homeschool or if you've been at it for a long time and maybe things aren't working well or you'd like to tweak some things. But today I want to share 10 tips for homeschooling a child with autism. We have been homeschooling for about six and a half years solid. We did some part-time school and part-time homeschool, kind of hybrid things for the 3 years before that. But I would say these last 6 years, I've really gotten a good feel for what is beneficial, how I need to tweak things, and how that looks a little bit different than what I might do for some of the other children based on what my child with autism really needs and what helps him to thrive. And the joke is, if you've met one child with autism, you've met one child with autism, because they are so different. That being said, it is helpful to look for things that we can sort of generalize and see what tends to work over and over. So use these 10 tips as a guidepost. Throw out the ones that you don't like or that don't work for your family, but hopefully these will give you some encouragement. So, okay, the first thing, and I would say this works for any kid, is to ditch the textbooks. So especially if you're new to homeschooling, you might be thinking, oh gosh, I've got to replicate what they're doing in the classroom, and you're imagining duplicating your child's day in some way. And I want to say, no, do not do that. You don't have to. You're so free to teach in the way that your child will respond to. And really, education is best acquired through stories. And these stories are mostly found in living books. And if you don't know what living books are, I'm going to put a link in the show notes. You can click on that. It's sort of a Charlotte Mason-y term, but all it means is really excellent books that share stories that are true and good and beautiful. So I wrote a post on what a living book is, though. You can check that out later. But of course, when you get into math and the upper science, textbooks are probably going to be most appropriate. But we have found Apologia is the science we use, and we love it. And even though it is a textbook, quote unquote, the content is really conversational, and it's not a dry read. So you can still try to integrate good writing if you have to use a textbook for some subjects. But aside from math and science, any other topic is really best done through a great story. History, or of course literature, even the younger sciences, really story is the best way to go with that. And if your child has a very specific interest, and most people on the spectrum do, I would suggest that you start there and you work your way out. So Charlotte Mason talked a lot about spreading the feast, and that's a way to give our children a wide variety, a generous curriculum. And if your child has autism, you might think, oh, well, that's not going to work for him because he only responds to this specific topic. But I would argue that it does. Okay, they deserve the feast too. But the journey there might look a little bit different. So I want to give you a little example about how you can start where your child's at and sort of work your way out to include more variety in his in his diet of stories. Okay, so let's say that your child's thing is hats. He always wears a hat. He loves to look at hats. He collects hats. He likes to compare hats. That is like his topic. Okay, so we're going to start there. You could say something like, hey, did you know that one of our presidents was known for his hat? His name was Abraham Lincoln. He even carried important letters around inside of his hat. Isn't that cool? And there's actually a book that tells all about it. And I'm going to link to the book in the show notes because there's really a book and it's a cute book. And then you could say, hey, I can read it to you. And all of a sudden now you are reading a biography and you're teaching history. So then maybe you mention that there was this speech that Lincoln gave in this place called Gettysburg, and you pull out a map and you show them where Gettysburg is, and look, this is geography. Then you could say something like, it's pretty far away from where we live. Let's figure out how far it is. And you could do a little math. Okay, and then you could tell him he gave this important speech while he was there because everybody in the country was fighting with each other, but he loved our country so much that he thought it was worth fighting for. And so you're adding to that history that you were giving him. So now we've moved from a hat to the Civil War. Do you see how that worked? Then if you've got his attention still and he's interested in the war side of it, well, we've fought a few of them. So now maybe we can talk about the American Revolution and our founding fathers and how the government's run. And where did they get all of those great ideas on how to run a country? I hear that a lot of the founding fathers, including Alexander Hamilton, who is all the rage right now thanks to Disney Plus, I know they read a lot of Greek and Roman stories. And didn't those stories talk a lot about how to be a good citizen? Okay, and now we've moved from hats to the Civil War to Plutarch. So you're essentially becoming Amazon to your child. Okay, you want to say, if you like this, you'll love this. And you're helping them make the move outside of their comfort zone, one baby step at a time. So you can do this with any topic. Just find the beginning of the thread, which would be your child's interests, and follow it as far as he'll let you. All right, so that's all number one. That was a long one because there's a lot to say about good books, but let's move on to the second, which is to ditch the mold. You are going to have to step outside of the box to do well homeschooling a child with autism. That's just truth. Picking up a boxed curriculum might work for you if you're willing to severely modify or even completely throw out some of what is recommended. But in most cases, you're going to find yourself wrestling between the schedule and your child. So since when you're in those moments of passion with your child where you're fighting over your way or his way, those times generally prevent us from thinking clearly. So let me just say it to you like this. Your child should always win over the schedule. So this is not to say that your child cannot learn to adapt over time or that he wouldn't benefit from a consistent routine. He would. But when we're looking at the hows of homeschooling, you need to look at your child first, not a predetermined schedule. So an example of this might be if there's a science curriculum that you want to use, and it's laid out to be taught 5 days a week. But on Wednesday, your child spends most of his time falling apart, or he would rather be in his own world. Well, then you don't force your child out of his world to learn the difference between vertebrates and invertebrates, or whatever it is. You're going to let go of your schedule, and you're going to join your child where he's at. And just accept the fact that science is not going to happen Wednesday. So this brings me to point number 3, timing. No means no for now. So your child not being in a place to do science on Wednesday does not mean that you need a new curriculum or that you need to revamp his daily routine or that you need to research new supplements. It might mean those things or something else for that matter if it's consistently happening. But for this example, let's say it's not. Let's just say it's just Wednesday. And right now science is not working. Okay, so keep your cool. Smile. Tell your child who, remember, you would lay down on railroad tracks for, that it's not a big deal. So you could say something like, oh, I can see you're not ready for science right now. No worries. Vertebrates are pretty interesting, and I want to tell you all about them, but we can do it when you're ready. And then drop it. Your child not being able to do science on Wednesday and you acquiescing does not mean he's running the household. It doesn't mean that he will never learn what an invertebrate is. It means science is not working right now on this particular Wednesday, and that's all it means. If you have time to revisit it later when he's more relaxed and available, great. If not, do it tomorrow. And don't worry that, oh my goodness, now I'm going to be behind because I was supposed to do 5 science lessons in 1 week. You are not a slave to that curriculum. It is a tool in your toolbox that is supposed to help you educate your child, not cause you to go toe-to-toe with your child. And if for some reason, because this can happen sometimes with our kids on the spectrum, if invertebrates or whatever subject you're trying to cover just becomes the enemy and he just does not want to learn that, okay, then try to find a way to explain it in a way he'll appreciate. Or, my goodness, just move on. And maybe some other day he'll learn what an invertebrate is. So just keep the perspective of the big picture. So this leads me to the next point, which is number 4, motivation is key. People learn better when they are motivated to do so, especially children with autism. If you are intrinsically motivated to find out more about something, you'll want to learn it. You're going to be curious. Your mind will be open. Okay, we live in the Google age where if I want to know how to sew a certain dress for my daughter, I'm going to look it up. I mean, she's not going to have to cajole me too much to get me to do this. If I'm motivated to do it, I'm just going to do it. Now, don't flip this. I'm not talking about the reward system. I need to make this like neon sign clear. I am not talking about the reward system. What I'm talking about is, what does your child enjoy doing anyway? What does he already love? How does he already spend his time? Like that hat example, that would be the motivation for that child. So we need to take that motivation and marry it to the goal that we're trying to achieve for him right now, whether that be potty training or long division. So in the example earlier, we married the hat to history. Okay, I was wanting to teach him some history. Well, I found a way to do that by starting with the hat. Now, motivation and reward are always getting mixed up by people. And you might accuse me of splitting hairs. I'm not. They are two totally different things. So I want to give you an example of how they're different. So an example of the reward system would be something like this. Jimmy, I want you to do this page of multiplication. If you do this math page without complaining, I will give you extra time on Minecraft today. So don't do that. This is what I don't want you to do. Okay, so that's the reward system. Now, motivation is different. Motivation looks like this. Hey, Jimmy, tell me this. If you had 4 pigs on your farm and I told you they multiplied by 8, how many pigs would you have now? So this is what I do want you to do. Okay, so can you see the difference? In the first example, we were just essentially bribing Jimmy to do math with more screen time. In the second example, we were taking an element of Minecraft, and if you're not familiar with Minecraft, the pigs on the farm, they have a farm, and there are pigs on the farm. So we're taking an element of Minecraft, which is something he already loves, and we're marrying it to math. Okay? Jimmy could care less about his times tables. And honestly, do any of us care until we actually need them? But he's definitely interested in how many pigs are on his Minecraft farm. Okay, so we use that as the motivator. Now, spoiler alert, the motivation approach takes a lot more effort, oftentimes, than the reward approach. Okay, you're going to have to be creative. and engaged. You have to know your child and know what motivates him and be connected to that enough. I knew nothing about Star Wars or Minecraft, or Harry Potter. Like, those are not things I would ever seek out on my own. But because my kids love them, I know I can name all 4 houses at Hogwarts, and I know who the Jedis and Siths are in Star Wars. Like, I've learned some things because my motivation is a relationship with my child. So do you see, it even works for us? So the bottom line is just that more effort is required to raise a child with autism. But I bet you already knew that. And if you're listening to this podcast, I would bet $1 million you love your child and you want a relationship with him, and you are more than willing to put in the extra work and go the extra mile. So good for you. Okay, number 5, ditch your expectations, but not all of them. So in many ways, this experience of homeschooling your child, it's not going to be what you thought. Earlier, I talked about letting go of a strict schedule. That being said, it certainly doesn't mean that you have no expectations of your child, or that you can't have some sort of goals in mind, or that he just hangs out at the house and does what he wants all day and maybe he'll learn something. I mean, it's not an all or nothing thing. It's more of a dance, this homeschooling a child with autism. It's about relationship. It's about getting to know him and when you can challenge and when you should not challenge. Okay, so let's talk more about expectations. So here's an example of what I would say is incorrect thinking. My child is 10 years old, so he should be doing 4th grade math just like the rest of his peers. Okay? Now, a way to correct that statement would be something like, my child is 10 years old. He should be doing math that he can grasp right now, that will challenge him, but not frustrate him to the point of shutting down. So what is your goal for your child, for your child's education? For many special needs parents, it might sound something like, to make my child self-sufficient, to help him live productively in society, to be able to hold a job, to be able to make a friend, to be able to pay his bills. Okay, and those are all great, but remember that your child is a one-of-a-kind creation. And while grade levels and ages can be helpful in guiding us, they're never an absolute standard because every child is different. So pushing your child towards a goal is usually never as productive as meeting him where he's at and helping him to move forward. And that takes us nicely into point 6, to remember that slow and steady wins the race. Your child might not graduate on time. There, I said it. Did the world go on? It did. Do you know why? Because if it really happens, your world and your child's world will go on. And that might not be your fear point. It might be something else. It might be your child will never live on his own, or your child will never have a friend outside of our family. Whatever your nerve point is, whatever that one tender spot in you that makes you gasp in fear, whatever that is for you, I want you to know it's going to be okay. All right? God will always equip who he calls. And if you faithfully show up for your child and love him, I really don't know how you can go wrong. So much of homeschool and parenting and life, for that matter, is about faith, not formula. There's going to be no, like, if your child finishes his math book at a 4th grade level in the 4th grade, and especially if you sort of pushed him to make that happen, and he hates math, but like he did it just to get it done, then what? That secures that he'll be able to go to college? Or that secures that whatever that fear point is for you is not going to come true? That's not the way it works. So it might not be your goal for your child to not graduate on time or whatever your fair point is. And I get that. And please don't read this the wrong way. I am not by any means suggesting that you should look at your 6-year-old or even your 12-year-old and throw your hands up and say, well, whatever happens, happens. No. Work towards it. Set the goal. Have hopes. Be on a path with your child. But, dear heart, don't despair if he's 13 and still hasn't mastered long division. Or if he's 11 and is still a struggling reader. Or if he's 15 and he still needs you at his elbow while he does his work. Read the fable again. Remind yourself, slow and steady is what wins the race. And we're not even looking to win a race here. We're just wanting to complete it with our heads held high. So work diligently. Work consistently. Get a tutor if you need a tutor, or help your child if he needs extra help. Focus on forward motion and nurturing a love of learning. And remember that you eat an elephant one bite at a time. All right, number 7, mind your ears and eyes. Close your ears to judgmental voices around you and keep your eyes on the child the Lord has given you. You are not homeschooling to appease the people around you. You are homeschooling to educate the child in front of you. And that child is made up of all sorts of unique personality traits and challenges and strengths, and that child is unique to you. You are his mother for a reason. That was not an accident. So have faith, trust that God's going to give you the wisdom you need to educate this child. This is going to require a bit of tunnel vision, though. The world will be very quick to point out everything you're doing wrong. And I'm sure so many of you listening already have tons of stories about times that has happened to you. I know I do. And the other person who's going to be quick to point out all of your weaknesses and shortcomings is your weary soul. When you are at your worst and feeling exhausted, all you're going to be able to see is the ways that you failed. Okay? So I want you to focus on filtering the voices that you allow into your heart and mind. Seek truth and beauty and goodness and be accurate in your assessment, but be kind. Okay? And for goodness sake, if somebody, whether in real life or online or in print, makes you feel terrible every time you engage, disengage. You don't have to listen to these people. You can just shut it off or unsubscribe or disconnect from that relationship if it's not helping you to do what you need to do, which is faithfully and confidently show up and be strong for your child. Okay, so number 8, keep things short. One of the greatest joys of a Charlotte Mason education is the implementation of short lessons. Short lessons, if you are not familiar, are exactly what they sound like. They are lessons that are short. So this means if your child can understand the math concept in 10 minutes, you don't drag on for 30 because you're supposed to. That means read aloud sessions need to last for as long as your child can attend. That could be 5 minutes to start with, and then you build on that. Number 9, accept that academics are not what's most important. Seriously. So this sounds counterproductive because you are home schooling, but it's not. Your relationship with your child is priority number 1, bottom line. So knowing when to challenge your child and when to focus on your relationship instead is a dance that you should work to perfect. I mentioned earlier the Sunrise program, the therapy that we do. It's taught me all about this dance via practice called red lights and green lights. So I'll link to that. You can look into that. But even Charlotte Mason described education as being 3 tiers. And these, you think of a stool, it needs all 3 tiers to be the same size to sit on, all 3 legs to be the same size to stand balanced. And for her, she explained that education is an atmosphere, a discipline, and a life. And so the atmosphere is the world your child lives in his home. It's the attitudes, it's the temperaments, it's the Is it a positive environment or a negative environment? Is he being encouraged or is he being criticized all day? It's things like that. And then the discipline focuses on routines and rhythms and habits in his life that are predictable and help him to build himself in character. And then the third is the living books that we talked about, the living ideas, and that's academics. So even if you look at her, if you look at Charlotte Mason's explanation, academics really make up like a third of what we're trying to do. They're important, but in our postmodern, more is more driven culture, I think they get way too much weight, forcing preschoolers to learn to read, and kindergarten is the new first grade, and we got to keep up and we got to get ahead, and start them earlier and start them younger. And we've completely forgotten that number 10, our child is already a whole person. And when you're educating a whole person, it's not just academics, okay? But I want to expand that a little bit because that's point number 10, that your child is already a whole person. And it sounds a little silly at first read. Of course, Charlotte Mason wrote this in a very different world. This was definitely the Victorian era of, children are to be seen and not heard. And we've come a long way from that, but I still think this happens more than we realize. Charlotte Mason's first principle is that children are born persons. If you don't know Charlotte Mason, she had these beautiful 20 principles. You can, I'll try to link to them or you can Google them. And that's number 1, is how we are looking at the people we're educating. Children are not blank canvases. God already made a person for you to care for. Who is this person? What are his interests and strengths? What are his challenges? A child, even a child with autism, is not an empty drum waiting to be filled, but rather a new land waiting to be explored. Autistic children certainly have more pronounced challenges and more passionate interests and strengths, but they're still a pre-made child just the same. So no matter where you think the autism came from, I'm not going to get into that on this podcast, but whether you think he was born with it or that something happened and caused it to occur, no matter what, his autism is a part of who he is right now. So that's the person we need to be looking at. So your job as a parent is to fill the treasure chest of his soul with good things. Sally Clarkson, who I just love so much, has this beautiful illustration she talks about filling up the treasure chest of her kids' souls. And, the way you do that is through nurturing relationships and excellent stories and solid truths and beauty found in art and music and the great outdoors. But this treasure chest is a gift that you give to an already whole person. We can grow and change. Certainly we can learn, we can adapt, but it's important to keep in mind with our children that we're born with absolute potential, and it shouldn't be dampened or dissuaded in any way. And whatever path God has got them on, you're not going to take a child who loves writing and reading and is passionate about stories and things like that and could care less about math. He's probably not going to become an accountant. I mean, I'm just guessing. And if you're like third generation accountants in your family, that might come as a blow to you, but that's not who that child is. So it's so important to see who your child is and recognize that he's already somebody. So as they get older and closer to the tween and teen years, you can really see this flower start to bloom. And it's almost like a mirror, a fogged mirror. And, you can sort of see the picture coming together more and more every year. And this has been a neat thing as my oldest twins are now 13 and we're inching closer and closer to high school. I mean, I can really see the paths that they are on and take in their personalities and their interests and see what direction their lives are headed. And that's a neat thing to see. And it's something that we should definitely go along with and not try to reroute. Okay, I know I said 10, but I've got a bonus one for you mamas out here. This is just about you, not your child. Attitude is everything. It really is. I know that sounds like that might be too easy, but it is. You are the thermostat of your home. And that old adage, if mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy. We all know that to be too true. So get happy. This is where your responsibility comes in. You can't sit there and hope somebody else will help to make you happy. You have to take responsibility for that. So what fills you up and what drains you? Be sure that you're filling up enough to accommodate how much you pour out. I like to say for, the whole idea of a bucket and like filling each other's buckets. There were books that came out years ago that talked about this idea. And it's true, you're wanting to, whatever analogy you want to go with, whether you're like making deposits in their bank accounts. I like the bucket one because I like to say when you have kids with special needs, there's a hole in the bucket. Dear Liza, it reminds me of that song, but it's true. There's a hole in the bucket. It seems like no matter how much you pour in, there's like this drip, drip, drip. They're never full. And so knowing that I have to pour out maybe twice as much as moms with typical kids do, or, that is just all the more motivation for me to make sure I am overflowing. Out of the mouth comes the overflow of the heart. So that we need to fill ourselves to the brim with whatever it is that fills you. Okay, and that's so unique to each of us. You're going to have to figure that out, but make a list. I have a list. Maybe I'll do an episode on this one day called my best day list. I heard about this somewhere. I can't remember now, years ago. But I wrote down my best day elements. Things like waking up to coffee and quiet time before anybody else is awake. Or, having tea in the afternoon. Or getting one-on-one time with my kids, or, having a conversation uninterrupted with my husband, or going out with my friends, or perusing a bookstore, whatever it is. Okay. They don't have to cost a lot. They don't have to be complicated. It could be taking a walk, getting out in nature every single day, even if it's just, like in your neighborhood. Your child is going to respond to you a lot better if your attitude is pleasing. Okay. None of us, think of yourself, you go to a grocery store and your cashier is just grumpy. She's just the Debbie Downer, glass half empty. Oh, it's been such a hard day. You know how that makes you want to respond. And then the same if you have a really cheerful cashier. How you doing today? And she seems like she really wants to know. I mean, that's a totally different interaction. So who do you want to be for your child? I bet you want to be the cheerful one, right? So don't complain. Because life is hard, like for everybody. I mean, it's one thing if you're going through some things and you need to call your friend and hash things out. Do that. You should do that. But the little nitpicky, everything is wrong and why can't anything go right? And why didn't you clean your dish up? And like that kind of complaining is just, nobody likes that. And I'm sure you don't like that because I do it sometimes and I can't stand myself when I'm like that. So when you get like that, force a smile. Something magical happens. I'm not sure there's science to back this. It seems like there should be. But when you force yourself to smile, it's like it triggers something in your brain to like shift gears. And if you start to get snippy and just you feel yourself headed that way, go outside. Go away from everybody. Do something that will just disconnect you from the moment that you're feeling overwhelmed in. Go for a little walk, breathe some fresh air, something. If you find yourself getting frustrated, often do a little assessment and figure out what's the pattern. Why do I keep, maybe you'll figure out, gosh, every day at 2:00, I just feel like the day's piling up and we're not close enough to bedtime for it to feel hopeful, and I'm so snippy at this time. Okay, so change that. And now at 2:00, instead of whatever's normally happening that's making you frustrated, maybe now you guys, that's the time where you go for a walk outside or where you text a friend or whatever it is. Okay. And usually with these assessments, for me, I find out 9 times out of 10, it's when my expectations are not being met. It's when everybody around me is not living up to what I feel like needs to be happening. And so I get mad. I want everything to go the way I want it to go. And if it does, and then it doesn't, and I get aggravated about that. So ask yourself, are these really realistic expectations? I mean, is it really worth getting upset about? Can we alter these expectations to make the day better? Is there a habit that we can change that, the whole family needs to work on that will relieve this situation a little bit? And then when all else fails, just give yourself permission to just have fun for 5 to 10 minutes, even like with your kids. Like, just do something that always works for you guys, whether it be like you hop in the car and you drive to a park, or you put in an audiobook, or you turn on music that you love and you turn it up really loud and have a little 5-minute dance party. Just do something to get off that path, off that. It's almost like you're on a train track. Switch tracks. This is something you can do. Don't feel victim to your circumstance. Don't say, well, the kids make me feel, not without your permission. Nobody can ever make you feel something without your permission. So when you find yourself having that verbiage where it's really blame-based and you're giving all this power to all the circumstances and people around you, correct that. Say it in a different way. I get really upset when you do this, but you're choosing to get upset. So you could just not choose to get upset. And it takes training and it takes diligence, and you really have to rework a lot of habits that maybe you were raised a certain way and that victim mentality. But you can do it. You can change those thought patterns, and it will change the outcome. It's amazing. So I encourage you to do that, to take ownership of your life, make yourself happy, do things that put a smile on your face. Don't expect them from other people and then get mad when they don't deliver. And just be the thermostat. Show your kids the way. Okay, and remember, above all, you are your child's best advocate, and you are his most natural teacher. Okay, so homeschooling a child with autism might be challenging some days, but it is always, always, always worth the effort. So go after it, Mama. You can do this. Thanks so much for listening to Homeschooling Outside the Box. If you are loving the show, please head over to iTunes and leave a review. This is a great way to help other moms just like you find encouragement in their homeschool with their outside-the-box child as well. For more encouragement, be sure to head to cindyrenna.com, and you can check out some great blog posts as well as a shop that will help equip you on your homeschooling journey.